Welcome to You Can Trust Yourself with Meg and Maggie. Nothing feels as good as listening to your own voice, and each week we have conversations to help you do just that. Get comfy, grab your favorite fun drink, and let's dive into this week's episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 4 of You Can Trust Yourself podcast. Really quick, I will give this no more attention than 20 seconds, but we have just spent the last 2.5 hours trying to bring you the best audio ever, and it was not working. Hopefully, by the time you hear this, we have troubleshooted a million times, and it should sound really good now, but just know that we spent 2.5 hours, and it has been quite the debacle. Maggie,
Oh my God,
would you say?
I didn't even realize that it has been 2.5 hours. It's just one of those things that you get so deep in the tech rabbit hole that like your whole life passes by and you don't even know, you know?
And it's one thing to get in tech rabbit hole when you're like techie, but there's no techie bone in our body.
Uh,
Like,
yeah, I'm usually pretty good with tech, but this one is surely stumping me.
oh my goodness. Well, we are here to bring you a really fun episode because we are going to do some episodes like this where they're more like short and sweet, right? We want to get right to the root of it, right to the specific, so that you can use this episode and be like, wow, okay, I have something now to develop this skill further, whatever it may be. So, we are talking today about how to say no in a way that doesn't feel, like you're being a B word.
Insert word of choice.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm like not saying the word bitch. This is an explicit podcast and I have a dirty mouth, but somehow Meg's has gotten cleaner with the words. I don't know what's going on here. But yes, how not to do it in a way that you walk away feeling like, oh my gosh, I was just such an asshole to that person, right? Because the reason we wanted to record this podcast is a lot of the rhetoric, narrative, whatever you want to call it, around setting boundaries and saying no, oftentimes has a really harsh landing, right? And believe me, there is a time and a place for a hard NO period, right? There are some situations and some people who really require that hard NO, right? But when we see this narrative of like no is a complete sentence, no period, whatever it may be, it's not really tangible for everyday life because most of the times when we're saying no to people that we got to see again, right? We either got to see them in the office on Monday, or we got to go home and see our spouse, or we got to see our mother in law again, or our mom, or whoever it may be. And so we are going to deep dive into a very specific episode teaching you how to say no in a way that works for us, where we don't walk away from it feeling like, wow, I was just a total, complete, not nice human right there. So we're going to dive right into it. So, Maggie, tell us a little bit about what it used to look like maybe for you to say no and how hard that may have been to kind of where you are now and where we are going to take our listeners in present day.
Yeah, I think that this is an evolution for most people. It definitely was for me. So, saying no was always something that was very challenging for me. I didn't like having to put myself in a situation where someone else might be upset with what I had to say, right? Or they wanted me to do something and I didn't want to do it. And that made me really uncomfortable, right? Because I didn't want to let someone down or, make them upset or angry or any of those emotions that might not feel so great in the moment, right?
Mm.
And so for me, saying no was kind of non-existent for a while. And then I definitely did swing a little bit into the no is a complete sentence, framework, right? And I think that that works for starting to do it at all, right? And I think that if you're in that place where you really struggle to say no to anyone, swinging all the way to the opposite end is necessary sometimes, right? With some things, it's like, okay, well, we got to start somewhere. And if doing it gradually and gracefully isn't in the cards for me right now, maybe we just have to go full send, right? But
Full send. I
full
love
send,
that.
full send, no.
Very
But
Gen Z of you, Maggie.
I know. Um, but that doesn't it's not sustainable, right? Because like you said, it doesn't make you feel really good in relationships that matter to you when you're not I don't want to say nice, but maybe kind, right? Maybe you are putting your needs so far above the needs of the other people and the relationship that then maybe you're causing some pain along the way, not only for the other people, but also for you, right?
Hmm.
So what we want to get to, which took me a long time, and I'm still not perfect at it. I don't think we ever will be, but we want to get to a place where we are able to honor ourselves and say no while being able to feel good about that interaction afterwards, right? So I feel like that's one of the biggest litmus tests for me is how do I feel after I have this interaction? And that really helps me know how good of a job I did setting that boundary, I guess.
Hmm. I love that. And what I hear you saying specifically while you're going through, kind of what it used to look like for you, and then fast forward to present day, is it sounds like in the past you were almost saying no, but as you were saying it or not saying it, I know you mentioned that you hadn't said it sometimes, you had everybody's opinions in your mind while saying it. And I think that's the biggest, like, so we're going to go really tangible in this episode. I think that's one of the first things that we have to kind of like dissect is that we have to find a way to say no with what feels good for us, but we still can't be too concerned about what others may say. Because here's the truth, for some people who you really need to set the boundary with or say no to, you can say it in the kindest, sweetest way. And if they don't want to hear it, it does not matter what you said.
Yep.
So let me say that again. There's some people you can rehearse your kind, loving, sweet sentence. You may be like me. I'm someone who likes to put it on a sticky note and I put it everywhere. And I'm a rehearser. I would write it down and practice. And that was just my way of doing things because I didn't want to be unkind. But what we need you to know is that there are some people where it will not matter how you say it, it just won't matter because
Yeah.
they don't want to receive it. They don't care to hear your boundary. So I want to start there before we can go into practical. And I feel like you have something to add to that, Maggie.
Yeah, I think that's why I like to gauge it on how I feel,
Mm,
not how they feel, right? Because if I base how I feel about how I set a boundary on how someone is responding or reacting to me, then I'm not actually paying attention to how I feel, right?
mhm.
I'm just paying attention to now my reaction to their reaction, right? And we're in this back and forth. So I think it, like you're saying, it's important that we don't put too much pressure on what the other person does in response because we're not in control of that.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the reason why we really wanted to bring you this episode is that so if we're focusing, so now let's shift into if we're focusing on our experience, our reaction of setting the boundary and saying the word no, right? We, most of us humans who want to be kind and want to be loving and want to have healthy, friendly, functioning relationships with other human beings, how many of us say or text the words NO period and feel good about it afterwards? Right? That's just not how a lot of people talk unless it's, hi, do you want a slice of pizza? Yes or no, right? But you typically, we're wordier as humans a lot of times. And so we want to really talk about the practical ways that you can feel good about how you say whatever you need to say and you don't stress so much about what their response will be.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing to do that has helped me the most building this skill, right? Because, like I said, it used to be full send, no, very abrupt and abrasive, to getting to a place where I feel more graceful, but also um, I feel more satisfied in the way that I'm able to do it and like maintain relationships is a pause, right?
Mm.
So, what that looks like for me most of the time is buying myself time by saying something along the lines of, "Ooh, like that sounds really fun. Like, let me get back to you with an answer." Right. And when we can remove the pressure of having to say yes or no in the exact moment when you are asked something, then it gives you time to not only sit and figure out what you actually want to say, right? Do you actually want to say yes? Do you actually want to say no? But it gives us the time to also, like you're saying, craft that response and allows us to feel good in the way that we respond to this person's request. And when we don't have that time, then we get stressed and feel a lot of pressure and then probably say something that we're not too thrilled about. So that is one of the things that has helped me the most. Is that something that you have done?
It's something that I strive to do. I feel like this is actually an area that I really look up to you in that way because I think you have really mastered that approach of giving yourself time. I still find that to be a challenge for myself. I've gotten a lot better at it. But you, Maggie, we're obviously co hosts, but we're also friends, really good friends. And I've actually learned that from you quite a bit. You have a very kind but honest way to yourself of saying, thank you so much for sending that invite, or thank you for, inviting me to that, or let me get back to you, whatever it may be. You do it in a way where it's true to you, which is kind in nature, and it gives yourself the opportunity to respond however you want to. So it's almost
Thank
like a
you.
kindness. It's almost like a kindness to yourself at the same time of saying, I need some time to think on it. And seems to be like, for anybody listening, I feel like sometimes that's just like the magic right there is just, it can be hard enough for ourselves to honor ourselves to say, I need some time to think on it. That's half the practice right there, is just giving ourselves space to not feel like we need to respond in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I kind of want to go on that a little bit. When people make you feel pressured to respond in the moment, that's usually bad planning on their part, right? If someone is requesting something of you and they have not factored in that you might not be able to respond at this very second, that is not your fault. Right? That's not your problem. That's not a me problem. That's a you problem. Okay. And that is something, it's really hard to do that though, and to not take on that burden of someone else's poor planning, right? And I'm watching your face and you're like, oh, this is so true. But it really is. And it's one of the most uncomfortable parts of this, right? Because we feel pressured most of the time to respond in the moment because most people have not done enough planning to allow you to take your own time, right? But that doesn't mean that we should continue that cycle of just saying yes in the moment because we don't have enough time to figure it out or say no. And it also doesn't mean that we should just say no and be mean in the moment because we're stressed out, because we're just perpetuating the cycle either way,
Mm,
right? And so one of us has to be the bigger person and try to break this cycle. And the best way we can do that, that's healthy for everyone, is to pause.
mm, mm. That part, it needs a moment.
And we're just going to pause on that.
We're gonna pause on that. That hit me in two ways. It hit me in the way of receiving it, of being like, yes, yes, yes. When someone asks you a question or invites you to something or name whatever the scenario is, and there's an immediacy to what they want from you, that is their responsibility that we naturally tend to take on when we want to be pleasing and nice and cordial, right? And what you just said, Maggie, I think so many people needed to hear, us, even me, that that's not your burden to take on. Their immediate need does not become your issue. And I also, if you're watching on YouTube, I made a bunch of faces while Maggie was saying that, of like, whoa, because I've also been that person who has done that to others, where maybe I haven't planned accordingly, or I have to do something last minute, or whatever it may be. And I have been in scenarios where I have been the person who naturally, through the scenario, it kind of defaulted to pressure on them. And nobody feels good about that either. So this conversation goes both ways. But for the purposes of today, what you just said, Maggie, about that pause, the pause is everything. The pause is the in between from the what you're experiencing, whatever it may be, right? I mean, holidays are coming up. So who is not having a couple uncomfortable conversations about where you're going, who's doing what, who's inviting, the aunt that we don't want to see, or the uncle that you don't want to see, or the cousin, whatever it may be, those nuances of relationships with other humans, that pause is everything that a lot of us really, really, really need.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the more that we can allow ourselves to develop that skill, the easier it gets, right? Because there is a time and a place for immediate responses. There
Mm,
are certain things that require a response immediately. They require you to choose yes or no. And I think that when we put that pressure on every single thing in life, like I catch myself doing it usually to my husband. He's the one that gets the worst of that where I want an answer out of him immediately about something that really doesn't matter, right? Like I
mm,
really should not be requesting an answer so urgently about what we're going to have for dinner or something stupid, right? And
mm,
what it does is it perpetuates this cycle of pressure. And then in the moments where it really matters, we're not able to do it well, right?
mm.
So we want to be able to practice that pause as someone who is responding. And I think one of the ways that we can really support ourselves in that is by practicing the asking too,
Mm,
like giving other people benefit of the doubt, giving other people grace in the way that they respond, the way that you would want it.
yeah. Everything that we've talked about so far is really making me think of this theme of like kind of having to be you have to actively almost have a little more self-control with
Yeah.
yourself and with others. You have to actively choose to not give in to this like urgency culture that we are so inundated with as a society, right? I have to actively practice that when I'm on my phone at night, scrolling or whatever I may be doing, and I see an email come in, I have to actively say, Megan, please don't answer it right now. Like it can wait till the morning. You're scrolling right now and having some fun with scrolling. Let that be it. Like, you don't need to respond to that email, but I feel it.
Hmm.
I feel the urgency of like, well, I should just get back to them quick.
Yep.
Right. And so I have to actively choose not to do that. Because if I actively choose to do that, now I'm making that the habit.
Hmm.
Right. And so, for any of you who are in that right now, who feel that urgency to respond to a text, respond to an email, respond to a person in person, whatever it may be, this is going to be an active strategy that you have to implement if you want to change this way that you are functioning. Right. And it takes time and it takes little steps. And it could be something as simple as being like, nope, that email is going to wait till 9 a.m. tomorrow, right? Whatever that may be. It's a practice and it's not always easy, but it's one that you have to engage in to frame it in a different way for yourself.
Yeah, you have to practice. It's not something that's going to just change in a moment because you want it to. That would be lovely. I wish that was the case, but it's
Yeah.
not. Something I've done to help me decrease that urgency burden is turn off a ton of notifications on my phone.
Mm,
So really, I only get notifications for things that are truly urgent. Right? Like I don't really even get text message notifications on my phone. Like if I open my phone, it'll show me the little bubble of how many text messages I have, but they're not constantly popping up. I'm not getting notifications on my Apple Watch because I, it's not necessary for me to respond the second I receive a message. And
mm,
if it is that necessary, you're gonna call me, right? Like I know if you have something that you need to talk about, or whether it's podcast related, not podcast related, you're gonna call me. And if
mm,
I'm available, I'm going to answer the phone, right? And so it just helps me relieve that pressure and like the anxiety around it, which then also helps me in like in-person situations as well.
mm. There's something that you said that really stuck out to me the most, and that was the urgency burden. That is like, that's it right there, that part, urgency burden. The urgency that we have created as a society has become a burden to our lives and the way that we interact as human beings. So, if we go back to, saying no and doing it in a way that we feel good about for ourselves, the urgency aspect to it is half the battle. That's half of the reason, in my opinion, that we struggle so much to say no is because we feel this like accelerated treadmill pace of having to say something or respond. And so I'm really happy that I'm saying a lot of halves here. Half the episode we've spent talking about that pause because that pause is your shield from the urgency, right? So the urgency burden where it comes down and it's like, okay, I feel like I have to respond now. That pause, that intentional, active pause is your new BFF. Okay. You didn't expect to come here today and get a new BFF, but your pause, and we're going to give you all the tangible tools probably now to tell you of things you can say is your new BFF. You're welcome. Here you are. Introduce yourself. This is like one of our secret weapons as humans, Maggie and I both, to give ourselves that darn pause, right?
Mhm.
So, Maggie, I'm sure you've got a plethora of things that you have said, but we can do this two ways. Maggie and I didn't discuss this ahead of time because we really like to just be candid in the moment. Maggie, would you like it if I prompt you with a scenario and you respond, or would you like to just give me some of your natural things that you say, commonly to buy yourself some time and honor yourself with that space?
Yeah, I think the latter would be good. To just talk about some of the things that we say. Okay, so one of the things, this is kind of more of like a framework versus a word for word. Okay. But one thing that I do is I try my best to take responsibility for what I'm saying. So if, let's say you ask me to do something and I don't want to do it, I'm not going to say, Meg, that's a terrible idea. No, right? I'm not going to put it back on you as you are the reason why I'm saying no. I'm going to say no for whatever reason, whether I give one or not, and it's going to be about me, right?
Mm,
So, oh, that is, such an interesting idea. It's not going to work for me right now, but maybe in the future. Right. And I want to take that responsibility of the no, because even if it does have something to do with you, I don't need to say that to you. This is where the kindness comes in, right? This is where we get the choice of how we respond and who we're going to be in that moment. I
mm,
don't need to create conflict about something that's already challenging because that doesn't make anyone feel good, right? And
mm,
so 99% of the time, unless there's actually something that needs to be addressed, which I feel like that's a different conversation, I'm making sure that my response when I'm saying no is geared towards me.
mm. I really, first of all, I appreciate the tangibles that you left us with there of, actual kind of a template of how you can frame it. It's always really, really helpful to hear that in the moment. And I also really appreciate how you are able to say it in a way that is just Maggie and it's your experience, right? And so I think that's a lot of the takeaway too is that it is your experience. We have zero control over how anybody will respond, right? Even the people closest to us. I can think like I know exactly how my husband will respond, or I know exactly how my best friend will respond, or my mom or my brother, whoever it may be, people really close to me. And man, oh man, can they throw me a curveball, right? So I can't respond to things in a way that is tailored to them because we are all so different. So it has to be our experience. I have to say something that honors myself, feels good, and for me has a kind nature to it because that's who I want to be as a human being. So for me, that can look something like saying, nope, that's not going to work for me in this season. I use this season a lot because it's kind of my way of of viewing my life in general. I view life in seasons. It doesn't always have to be four perfect seasons like fall, winter, spring, summer, but just like I'm in a season of, this past summer I was in my bridal season, right? So I may have said no to things due to being in that season. I may have said no to things and didn't give a reason or have to have anything past that. So I kind of want to dive into that a little bit, Maggie, of how we can say things without feeling like we need to give a reason. Because sometimes I think we stumble over, it's like our second default, right? If we finally get ourselves to the point where we're like, okay, I can say no, but I feel like I got to explain myself when I say no. So let's move into like phase two. So you know that you want to say no, and you don't really necessarily even want to provide a reason. What are some things that you have said or that our listeners could say that don't need any explanation, but they still feel true to your experience of how you respond to people?
No, thank you.
Oh my God. I
Um,
I had no idea what you would say. That's the best thing I've ever heard.
Here's the
No,
deal.
thank
Let's
you.
let's get real for a second, okay? The more reasons you give someone as to why you're saying no, the more opportunity they have to poke holes in
Mhm.
your no, to spin you right around, and now all of a sudden you said yes. Okay? So let's just be real about that for a second. When you
Mhm.
like, I'm highly trained in sales, like done sales for a long time. It's a sales strategy, right? If someone gives you an objection to why they don't want to buy something and they start giving you all these reasons, you could just spin them right into a yes, right? Because now
Woo.
you have all these talking points, right? So here's the thing is like I always want to err on the side of honesty. Okay. First of all, do not make things up. That is like if you start making things up, little white lies here and there, whatever, now you have to keep track of all those things, right? Like, okay, we just need to throw all that out the window. If that's you, give yourself love and compassion. I'm giving you love and compassion right now because I used to be that person too, and it makes your life so complicated. Okay.
I was
So
that person too.
if you feel like you have to make things up, that's when you just say, no, thank you.
Mm.
And you're going to feel so anxious and you're going to want to explode and just be like, but because this and this and this and this and this. And you just turn around. Okay. Just turn around, just walk away. I don't know what you need to do. Go journal it out yourself. Right. But if you start giving all these excuses, whether they're true or not, then you're setting yourself up for failure because you're making it a lot harder on yourself.
Hmm.
Okay. So I just want to start there. Second is that if you are being honest and you're keeping it close to you, then you can choose how much detail you want to go into, right? And with certain people that you're really close to, that you know love you and are going to respect your no, maybe you can go into a little bit more detail about why, right? Because maybe you need to talk about it or something, right? And like you said in the beginning, Meg, there's going to be people who, if they're going to be upset that you're going to say no, then you got to just keep the details to yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't know if there was anything tangible in there, but that's your pep talk for the day.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good. And I used to be the queen of white lies. I still find myself from time to time wanting to reach for them, and I have to actively not reach for them, right? It can be so much easier to say in the moment, nope, I have something else planned that day, or nope, I'll be here. But let me tell you, those white lies, man, oh man, do they stack up, right? Because now you got to figure out, they're going to ask you at some point, how was the concert that was imaginary? You're going to be like, what? And you're going to be like, what concert? Right. And it's like, I did that countless times. So if that is you, like there is seriously zero shame, zero judgment there because it's it's a way of, well, if we're going with honesty, it's a cop out.
Yeah, it is.
It is. And it was a good one, right? We had a good run with it, and it doesn't align with me anymore. I'm trying my best to not be that kind of human because I don't need an excuse anymore. The goal is to get to a place where we don't need to make things up because we can truly and honestly say what we need to and truly and honestly keep information to ourselves if we don't feel like sharing it. There doesn't need to be a rhyme or reason for that. And so your example of no thank you, it just made me giggle because I didn't know what you were going to say. And the no thank you is just, what can you poke at no thank you? That's it, right? And so, nope, not at this time. No thank you. Not going to work for me. Whatever it is, There's no room really for anything else. And here's the thing, people who respect you or elevated or whatever it may be aren't they I got to be so careful with my words here. I'm trying to be careful with my words. If you have a loving, mutually nurturing relationship, those people are not going to try and poke holes at what you said. They respect you, and they're going to respect that you said that for whatever reason you needed to. And if you don't have that, there are so many people out here who will love you like that. And I'm praying for any of you who, in the future, I pray you have more relationships like that. You have them here with me and Maggie. We're your first two. Come talk to us in our DMs. Um, yeah, send a little heart. We hope that for all of you, that you have relationships with people who you don't have to feel this way, like you have to have something prepared. And we know that that's not reality, right? And there are a lot of people that will try and poke holes at your no, right? And will try and spin it around. And the biggest detachment that we have to do is honor ourselves by realizing it has nothing to do with their experience anymore. And it's your experience. And being able to talk ourselves through that and keep it short and sweet, like Maggie had just alluded to, they can go and talk about it to somebody else or journal about it for themselves, or they're probably not journaling about it, gossiping about it to somebody else or whatever it may be. Let them. That's where that phrase, let them, that really applies here. Let them do whatever your no sends them into that spiral. Let that be. You have said no to something. You feel good about how you said it, and you're moving on with your life. And that is a skill that I wish I had when I was younger, and I didn't. And so if there's especially anybody could be listening to this, you could be in your 60s and nobody ever talked about this, right? And so you could be hearing it for the first time. And it is a very, very valuable skill that we all can have to truly say no in a way that feels good for you. And you're not worried about the reaction so much of somebody else.
Yeah, it is a skill that you will develop, like we said, over time and with practice. And I think the last thing that I want to say on this is that I really like to say thank you. When I'm being invited or asked to do something, I really like to look at it through not so much the lens of burden or obligation, but through like, oh, this person thought of me,
Mm,
or, they wanted to invite me to this. And even if I feel overwhelmed or anxious or even annoyed or frustrated, right, that I'm getting asked something, I still try to look at it through that lens and say thank you to that person. Thank you so much for inviting me, or thank you so much for thinking of me, before
mhm.
I then, let them down easy. Tell them I won't be there. I'll be on my couch instead, not at your Halloween party if you listen to last week's
Last week's episode.
episode. um,
I
but
will be there.
Meg will be at the party and I will not.
Yes.
But I think that's really the last like layer of it for me, is that I want to say thank you, because then it helps to continue to nurture that relationship as you're not then showing up, you know?
Yes. I love that you took that a step further, Maggie, because it really ties back into what we said in the beginning about, this narrative and this big push that we have, which honestly is happening for good reason. Like people who are posting like no is a complete sentence. It absolutely is and can be. But you have found a way to say no that honors Maggie. And at the end of the day, you're going to feel better about saying no when you've done it in a way that aligns with who you are, right? So when you're first getting into it and you're like practicing setting boundaries and you're learning that there's another way to do things, right? And that no can exist in your world. Because for so many people and for so long for us, no didn't really exist. It was just like, sure, how can I make it work, right? And so to be able to do it though in a way that you can make it yours is really, really special, because you are going to feel better about saying no or setting the boundary when you've made it your own. And so I know I've said that like 100 times, but I really I wish somebody would have said that to me when I was learning how to set boundaries and how to say no, because it felt artificial for me to take somebody else's copy of how they were doing it and imposter syndroming my way through it and making it my own. Whereas if I would have heard a conversation like this, I would have been like, wait, I can still honor myself and say no all at the same time.
I'm so excited for everyone listening to start doing this or continue if you
Ah.
have already started. But we would love to hear from you about this conversation too. So, whether it's questions that you have or just your experiences or anything you want to share, send us a message on Instagram or TikTok. Probably those are the best places to reach
Mhm.
us right now. But we would love to hear from you and hear how you've had success with saying no gracefully, or maybe even the times where, it didn't go so well. So I can't
Yeah.
wait to hear from you there.
Me too. From last week's episode, we've gotten to interact with quite a few of you more over on Instagram and TikTok and socials, and it just feels so good. I know we've said this from the beginning, but one of our biggest pivots in the podcast this time around for season 3 was truly to create more of a community. So hearing from you and us being able to interact back with you is just really fun. So, yes, like Maggie said, let us know your experiences, what you found valuable, questions, whatever it may be. We're looking forward to talking to you more, and we'll see you on episode 5.
Oh my gosh, that is wild. It's going so
Smile.
fast, but it's so fun.
We love you all very much. You can do this. You deserve to say no. You deserve to make decisions that are for yourself, and you, bump, deserve to trust yourself.
Heck yeah. Yeah, you do. Okay, everyone. See you next week.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on another episode of You Can Trust Yourself with Meg and Maggie. Our mission is to leave you with encouragement and tools to nurture your ability to trust yourself. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe and please share it with a friend. Then take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating and review. Your support helps our show grow, and for that we are extremely grateful. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch the episodes. Till next week, lots of trust and love, Meg and Maggie.